Hi, everyone. This is Matt Kinsman, Head of Content at Connectiv. Thanks again for joining us today for how AI can transform customer management for publishers. The industry's readiness for artificial intelligence is really on a spectrum. On one hand, I can remember being at a media conference a couple months ago, and after hearing a keynote on AI, I overheard one attendee say, I'm just not ready for that. On the other hand, you've got Google CEO saying at Davos today that AI is going to be bigger than electricity or fire. Definitely bold words, but the fact is that AI is starting to creep into our daily lives, and it's already being used by publishers and others for content recommendations, customer service, and even lead gen management. Today, we're going to be offering a 101 approach to understanding the potential of AI and applying it as a customer management tool. I'd like to welcome Tony Lismas, VP of Marketing at Wysdom.AI, which provides enterprise cognitive care solutions. Many of you may have seen Tony deliver excellent talks on native advertising and other digital trends for the Connectiv community in the past, and we're delighted to have him help us really navigate our way with AI today. Tony, take it away.
Great. Thanks for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and greetings from sunny San Francisco. I want to thank you for joining me here today, and also thank Matt and his team at Connectiv for having me here. So, we've seen a lot of revolutions over our time. One of the big ones, of course, was the press, or the printing press, and that really changed a lot about how it is that we communicate with the outside world. Electricity, as we just heard a second ago, another huge revolution. Of course, that changed everything. Even the one that I can remember the most is the personal computer. It really changed the way we do business. It changed the way we learned. It changed the way we interacted with each other. And most recently, the mobile revolution. Oh, that's the wrong Apple phone. That's the one. That's the one that kicked off the mobile revolution. And that's completely changed the way we interact with each other, or in some cases interact with our phones when we're taking selfies and sending text messages to each other. But nonetheless, it was a huge shift and a huge revolution. And it's no surprise that we are now among the newest one, which is AI, artificial intelligence, which brings us here today. Now, I know that out of all the thousands and thousands and thousands of images on the web, I chose this one to represent AI. And yes, it is a little freaky. A robot choosing which human face it's going to replicate. But I chose this by design, because with every new revolution comes questions, comes concerns. I mean, Matt just said it. He heard someone say, I'm not ready for this. So we have to break down that fear, and we have to push forward. So yes, it might be a little scary, but that's why we're here today, is to set some precedent. And AI has already changed so many industries. I think in our lifetime we're going to see, we're going to move away from this to autonomous driving, where we're going to just be sitting in the back seat, enjoying ourselves, having fun, and let the car drive us instead of us driving the car. AI has made huge impact on the medical and science field, especially in the way that we find and treat patients. Huge advantages there. When we look at things like Mother Nature, and especially all the natural disasters that we've been seeing recently, AI has really helped us to be able to pinpoint, predict, and be able to move forward even around weather patterns. So lots of AI has helped around there, and even at the retail side. Black Friday used to just be you sell whatever was left over in your store. But with AI, people are able to be a lot more predictive about sales and trends, and be able to more intelligently purchase their stock and predict what will be left over. And even the way we set a timer, remember this? We had to manually turn this timer just to figure out when our cooking was going to be done. It was just so much manual labor. Now we use the AI on our phones to set the timer, so thankfully we don't have to do it anymore. And you'll see Siri, even if you read that, has a little bit of a sense of humor around that. So AI has really already impacted so many industries and so many aspects of our life. And yet, when it comes to customer care, the way that we talk to our customers and provide service and support, that hasn't changed a lot over the past little while. And it's evident because even when we look at some of the stats, when we chat online, 90%, over 90%, still has to lead to a human interaction in order to satisfy the need of that customer. So how can AI adjust that? And that's what we're going to talk about here today. So as per the introduction, my name is Tony Blosmos. I'm VP of Marketing. Some of you may have heard some of my past talks, so I'm super excited to be working with Connectiv again. I work for a company called Wysdom. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but what we do is we are a full-stack cognitive care platform. And the two things that I really want to point out is we've been around since 2012, and our platform has been around, Wysdom, since 2014. And that's 4 years of real-world operational expertise, real-world training. And a lot of that will make a lot more sense towards the end of the webinar, but really it emphasizes the pedigree of as we walk through AI and talk about the rest of the webinar, of some of the expertise that we're bringing to the table from this. I know that AI can be confusing, and a lot of you might be at different levels around AI, and I figure we're at the beginning of the year, so the best way is to level set, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk more around the basics and focus more on an AI 101 around digital service and support, the different channels, different terminology within AI, just so that we can level set there. And this is a bit of our agenda. So we're going to go over some 101 items. We're going to look at some social channels and how you can use them. This comes up a lot. So we're going to talk about bots versus virtual assistants, and is there a difference? Spoiler alert, yes there is. We're going to talk about NLP and go over some best practices. So as you guys start moving forward and embracing this, what are some best practices that you can apply to that? Then we're going to talk about training and what that means for the system. Now, I love feedback, and like I said, this is the beginning of the year. And so I would love it if you can share feedback either directly with me, there's a bunch of channels there, lots of ways to get a hold of me, or reach out to Matt or anyone else on the Connectiv team. Because what I'd like to do is understand what you liked about today's session and what you want to learn more of, so that as we go throughout the year and we do additional webinars and white papers and content and presentations, whatever, we can start tailoring them to what it is that you guys want to hear. So please provide your feedback, and if you're a little shy and don't want to do a Q&A later, feel free to reach out to me or anyone on the Connectiv team. Let's jump in with some level set terminology here. So we use the acronym AI all the time. I think we all know what that means. But another word or another acronym that we hear a lot of is ML. So of course we know AI is artificial intelligence, and ML is machine learning. Now, a lot of people interchange these terms, or they think that they're the same thing, and they're really not. And the way that I like to look at this is actually a great example that our CTO told me about last week, a great example of when you're looking at the difference between AI and machine learning. And think of it as a chess game. When you're playing a chess game against an AI. So if there's strict AI, what's happening is as you're playing the game, the system has thousands upon thousands upon thousands of outcomes and routines on how it's going to play the game. So when you make a move, it goes, okay, he just made that move or she just made that move, I'm going to run this routine. So it's relying on predetermined notions or predetermined scripts. With machine learning, as per the word, the machine is learning. So in a chess game, we're using AI and machine learning. At the end of the game, if this system lost, or even if it won, it's going to analyze everything, every single move that you made, every single move that it made, and it's going to train itself and learn from that experience so that it can get better. So really, it's also creating additional scripts and additional ways that it's going to be able to play later on. Now, AI itself is kind of made up of supervised learning and unsupervised learning. And here's the biggest difference between the two. And let's look at unsupervised learning first. So we're going to talk about this. And a great example is one that my CEO talks about. And unsupervised learning is the dream, of course. So the example that he gives is, let's say you drive your car around a block 1,000,000 times. In an unsupervised learning world, the dream is by the millionth and 1, so the million and first time, you get in the car and it drives itself around the block. It knows exactly what it needs to do through unsupervised learning. Now, supervised learning is actually the real world. That's the world that we live in here. So what happens is, during those million times that you're going around the block, by the million or first, when you get in the car, yes, it's able to drive you around the block, but not because it learned on its own. It's because there were people in the back end that were teaching the system, hence the word supervised. They were supervising the learning. They were teaching the system. They were adding analytics to, analyzing it. Sorry, I'm mixing up my words here. They're applying rules. They're applying labels. They're training it. They're modifying things. They're saying this is a stop sign. This is what you do at a stop sign. This is a child. If a child runs in front of the car, stop the car. When you get to the block, stop and look both ways. If there's no other car, proceed. If there is a car, don't proceed. It's putting these rules into play. And, of course, the system is learning over time as well on its own. So the human's not teaching it everything, but that's supervised learning. And there is a middle ground as well, where you provide supervised learning at the higher level, but some of your labels are some of your labels are unlabeled. And so that gives the system a chance to almost fail sometimes so that it can learn, but also the human that's supervising it could train it. But for the most part, this is what we're looking at, and that's what it means when people talk about supervised learning and unsupervised learning. Now, supervised learning is, as I said, that's in the real world. So the Amazons, the Googles, the Apples of the world, they have hundreds and hundreds of employees, and there's tons of articles around this that are training their AIs as we move forward. So let's move along. NLP is probably another word that you hear a lot of. That means natural language processing. Think of that as when you and I have a conversation, we're using words, we're using sentences, and we're forming them together. When I go into a store to order, or a restaurant to order something, I don't say hamburger. I say I would like a hamburger and fries, no ketchup, extra pickles. I'm having a conversation. So NLP is processing all that and being able for the system to understand human language. Now, NLU is another term that you might hear a lot of, and this in and of itself can be a webinar, the difference between NLP and NLU. But again, we're just level setting here, and so for the most simplistic purposes to lay this out, it means natural language understanding, and as per the term they're understanding. Think of it as when you and I are having a natural conversation, you'll understand me even if I make grammatical errors, if I use slang, if I slur my words, if I'm speaking with a heavy accent. Now think of it as a computer or a system might not be able to understand that if you're typing, if you're making mistakes, if you're using acronyms and the system can't understand that. So NLU at the most simplistic terms, and again, there's a lot of information around this, but at the most simplistic terms, think of it as it's the computer trying to understand what's happening. Again, hence the word NLU, understanding. In training, we have a whole section on training that we're going to talk about at the end. But for our purposes, when we talk about train, we're talking about training the system. AI is only as good as the training that goes into it. So as we use the term train, remember that we're always referring back to how we're training the system to make it smarter, to make it better. So that's some of our 101. That's to level set some of the terminology that we're using. Let's look at social channels. Now, there's a lot of social channels, and there's kind of two pieces here that I'd love for you to have as a takeaway. The first is how to use social channels to communicate with your customers. And the second is how you can then elevate that by adding AI and virtual assistants to automate a lot of this and be able to scale your service and support through the social channels. So, of course, the biggest one is Messenger through Facebook. Now, Facebook is huge, of course, and the beauty here is almost everyone is on Facebook. And so what you want to do is, as a brand, you want to be able to reach your customers where they are. So if they're on Facebook, chances are if they need service and support, they're going to reach out to you that way. So you want to be prepared and you want to be ready for that. Now, Facebook has spent a lot of time and a lot of investment in making their system very user-friendly. And they're actually great. They have a lot of great SDKs and APIs on the back end that tie it into virtual assistants and bots. So some of the stuff, for example, is when you have a question, you can have it so that Facebook Messenger has predetermined paths or journeys, like what you see here. This is an example of what a carrier might look like. So instead of typing what it is that I want, I can just point to one of these or tap one of these. Through the journey, you can also add buttons so that you can easily interact with the customer and they can quickly navigate through a customer journey. We're going to talk a bit about best practices around how to properly use this later on, but that's one of the things that Facebook offers. Now, they also have really rich interactive content. So for example, if they want to point you to an article, they'll show you, you can have it so that it shows a picture and you have the ability to share that or actually read the article. And then when you read it, it actually opens up in a web view in Messenger. So you're not leaving the app. You're not going anywhere else. If you're on the web, it just opens up another tab. If you're on your app, it opens up within the Messenger app. So that way the conversation just continues happening. It's also a great way to authenticate your users. You can actually have them tap on a link and then your authentication page pops up in the window. They authenticate who they are, and then you know that you're talking to the proper person. And of course, at the end of the conversation, you always want to solicit feedback. And this is a question that we hear a lot of. Well, if I'm using Facebook Messenger and I'm using a bot or a virtual assistant, so it's not a human managing it, it's a system, and they want to talk to someone, how does that work? Now, there are a lot of applications, Lithium and Sprinkler are a couple, that tie in to live chat. Now, what I'm going to show you is just samples. It's not an actual system or anything like that, but I just want to give you an idea of what it is. So if a user taps on Chat with Rep, what happens is on the back end, the rep is going to receive an alert similar to this. So this agent is being informed that I am escalating an issue. The channel is Facebook. And then the agent can open it up or can pass it, and then it would go to the next agent. If they tap open, then what I'm seeing is a list of all the chats that are going on. And there's various views, of course. So you have the picture that shows up on Facebook. It's always nice to put a face to a name. Their name, you can add other things like their status of or what channel they're coming through, how long they've been customers, how long they've been online. So you can get, the agent can get a really quick view of that customer even before they log into the issue. So in this case, they're going to click on me, and they're going to get a chat history. And this is great because right off the bat, they can see what it is that I was reviewing. So anything in light gray, for example, is what I typed. Anything in dark gray is what the bot or the virtual assistant replied back to me with. And then as the agent interacts with me, theirs is in a different color, so that as the agent reads this, they can see what they wrote versus what the customer wrote. Through AI and through intelligence, and depending on the platform, you can of course put a lot more intelligence into this. You can, you can have it suggest intents or suggest answers. There's a ton. Again, this can be a whole webinar all on its own. But at a high level, this is how an escalation is done from Facebook directly to a live agent. And we'll get into proper ways of doing that through best practices later on. Some of the other ones we want to talk about, this one comes up a lot, Twitter. And Twitter was probably one of the first to really have a robust way to communicate for a brand to communicate with a customer on the B2C level. But to quote one of my sales reps from earlier this week, everyone asks for Twitter support and then no one uses it. One of the biggest reasons is Twitter itself is mostly all text. So it doesn't really have a lot of rich interaction. As a result, although yes, you can text information, it's not as visual as some of the stuff that we saw with Facebook. So as a result, sometimes it's very difficult to get across. And in fact, I know through some of my interactions, by the end of it, they usually say, call our call center or go to the web and check the status. Instead of, again, it's all about providing the information where the customer is. If I'm on Twitter and I'm talking to you in Twitter, I'd like to finish this conversation in Twitter. So that is some of the downfalls that we're hearing around Twitter. You may have heard in the news, WhatsApp Business just got introduced. And it's the way that it works is it's a separate app. And in fact, it even has a separate icon, as you'll see there. And it is coming into a crowded space, no doubt. For now, it's Android only, and it's available in select geos. And Facebook, of course, who owns WhatsApp, is they're starting off small. They're aiming at smaller companies, which I think is smart as they grow. So keep in mind in terms of some of the stats, and when you start deciding what channels you want to support, I believe WhatsApp is the second most popular next to Facebook, and it has 1.3 billion active users. And there's already been a big B2C push. In fact, they are the leader, and a lot of people think, oh, they're the leader in South America, but they're actually the leader also in other countries like India, Russia, Spain, Germany. And what's really interesting, when I was digging into some of these articles over the past week, and I didn't even realize this, for small, medium business, SMBs, in India and Brazil, they already have 80% interaction with their customers on WhatsApp. So that's huge. So this is definitely a step for them in the right direction. And they're going to be competing with quite a bit, including WeChat, which I don't have up here, but you might recall from some of my past webinars, WeChat is huge. They already have 10 million official companies on their site that are authorized and authenticated with, and I believe that this makes them the third or the fourth largest, 980 million users. And WeChat, you do everything on WeChat, not just chatting. Actually, messaging is probably the smallest portion. You tip using WeChat. You purchase things. You do everything, including interacting with customers. So keep that in mind depending on where your geo is. Another big one that's been talked about quite a bit is Apple Business Chat. So they announced this last year at WWDC, and they've been betaing it up until now, and they've officially announced that the next version of iOS will include integration with Business Chat. The way that this works is a few years ago when Apple released iMessage, it really brought SMS to the next level. It allowed it to be a lot more interactive and a lot more rich. And so what they've done now is if a business has an iMessage account, you can easily interact with them the same way that you would interact with your friends. So the beauty here is that it's not a separate app. Apple has actually built it directly into iMessage, and you can find the business and chat directly with them through the built-in apps like Safari, Maps, Siri, Spotlight. And what's great is it really takes it to the next level. So as a brand, you're able to really interact with your customer, like some examples that they've provided here. The second one is a scheduler where you can set up an appointment with a customer. You can push your app to them. You can even pay. The example that I saw yesterday, which was great, was from Lowe's. And so someone is interacting with Lowe's. They're finding out what type of part they need, and then they use Apple Pay, which is directly integrated into iMessage, to make the purchase. That's it. They've now had a conversation with Lowe's and did everything that they needed to without stepping into the store or picking up the phone and talking to anyone. Really, really cool. Hot off the tails of that is Google's RCS. Now, this can also be a webinar all on its own. But at a high level, RCS is trying to be the next standard, and so they're working with the GSM board as well as carriers around the world to elevate SMS. So SMS is all text-based and MMS is all picture-based. And so RCS is, think of it as iMessage for Android. And again, I am simplifying things here, but for the most part. And so it started a while back. Google bought Jive, and they started integrating this. So you're going to start to see a lot more of this type of interaction. And what's great is, just like iMessage, it's a lot more rich. The experience, you can, as you can see here, integrate maps and stickers, and really brings SMS to the next level. And by working with carriers, it'll be much more widely accepted as well. Mark from our marketing team wrote a great article in the fall kind of comparing and talking about business chat and RCS. So you should definitely take a look at that if you are interested in learning more. And I'll tweet it out from my Twitter after this webinar so you can learn more about it as well. Lots of great stuff there. And we can't talk about channels without talking about the next generation, which is voice. Voice is great, and a lot of these things started off on the phone, but they've now have progressed to home appliances, particularly in the form of speakers of some sort. So you have Alexa with their Echo line. You have Google with their various home products. There's the Home Mini, the Home Max. Apple announcing the HomePod a while back, finally shipping it in 3 countries next month. And Cortana from Microsoft, who has been working with Harman Kardon on their home appliance. This, we're already seeing a lot of cool stuff going on with voice, but you're really going to start to see a lot more interacting. So imagine today when you want to interact, if a customer wants to interact with you, they might launch their app, they might launch a social channel and talk to you. Now imagine they're literally just saying out loud, hey Google, or hey Siri, or go Google, and asking the question of you. And through APIs and whatnot, you're able to provide a response back. Pretty cool. Again, that's a webinar all on its own as well. So those are the various channels. Keep those in mind as you recall that when customers want service and support, they want that provided where they are. And these are the social channels that they are. And so as you build out your strategy, keep that in mind, and keep in mind how to scale and automate this through AI. And we'll talk a bit about bots versus virtual assistants in just a sec. Oh, just a sec is right now. So virtual assistants, conversation, chat, this is really a big hero right now. This is kind of what everyone wants. And yes, chat is very good, especially for simple conversations like what you see here. This is an example of a telco brand. And it's really good for simple interactions. You ask a question, you get a reply back, or for changing simple things. And here's some other examples of what it's really good at. But when it comes to the really long tail conversations, and I'm not saying virtual assistants are not good for this, but when there's too much choice, again, it's not that it's not good, but sometimes customers will get too frustrated because they feel like they can't see that finish line. And as we see in the example here at the very end, clearly the customer is a little frustrated. So longer journeys might not be done the best through virtual assistants. So keep that in mind as well. But we keep talking about virtual assistants and chat and conversation, and we almost forget about search. And search is still the most widely used customer service tool. So as you're revamping and rethinking and elevating your service and support strategy, don't forget about that search bar that's on your own site when it comes to service and support. And remember that Google isn't a chatbot, yet a lot of people use it. Also, don't expect a customer to just go to Google to receive service and support on your product, particularly if you're a publisher. And certain audience are still more comfortable with simple search. Yes, it has a lot to do with demographics, so you should really look at your audience type and go, is search still the best thing for my customers? And search has been around for many years and is not going away. And in fact, search can integrate nicely with chat. These two things should be working together, not siloed. And whereas a chat, you might expect to be escalated to a human by the end of it, in search you're not. So a user is coming in, they know that what they need should be at their fingertips, they're asking the question, and a smart search is going to return, a simple answer back to them, and that's it. That interaction is done. And we know this from experience. So Wysdom was, our first product was through search, and it was adding artificial intelligence through search. And that's led us to conversations. But we know that that hasn't replaced search. In fact, what we're finding is the merging of these two things are working really well. There's a lot of cool things that we're working on how to integrate this. If you have any questions, I'd love to talk to you about it offline. But the point here is search, chat, two different things, but they can definitely work together. So don't forget about your toolbar, about your search bar on your own site. Now, let's look at bots versus virtual assistants. Now, there's a lot of times these terms are intermixed, and I admit sometimes I intermix them as well. But there really is a bit of a difference. And when you're looking to scale your service and support through social channels, be careful about the type of application that you settle on. And so I like to boil it down to it being kind of two types, a bot versus a VA or a virtual assistant. And this doesn't necessarily apply to everything on the market, and I am generalizing a bit here, but typically a bot, and this is a good way of thinking about it, tends to be per channel, whereas a virtual assistant, a VA, runs across all channels. So for example, your bot might only support your Facebook. There's some challenges with that because anything that it's learning from Facebook, it cannot apply to other channels, whereas and therefore also making it difficult to scale, because when you're ready to bring Twitter, Apple Business Chat, anything else online, you have to integrate different bots for each of those, whereas virtual assistants tend to have an SDK or an API that makes it easy to integrate with multiple channels. Now, as a result of what I just said, there's no cross-training. So on a bot, if it learns something from Facebook, it's not applying that learning to your online search, to your web chat, to Alexa, to anything else that's out there, whereas a virtual assistant does tend to do cross-training between channels. And again, I'm generalizing some of this, but for the most part, virtual assistants can train across channels. As a result as well, there's no coherence between channels. So if you start on one channel and continue a conversation onto another a few days later, you might have to repeat a lot of what it is that you're saying, whereas with a virtual assistant, you tend to be able to contextually pick up where you left off, even if it's in another channel. And in today's day and age, we're used to doing that. We're used to seeing a Netflix film on our TV and then being able to finish it on the plane on our iPad. So this is something that customers are expecting when it comes to service and support. Bots also tend to start from zero. So remember that AI is only as good as the training that it goes into. And a bot itself is just some code. But if you ask a bot something, it needs to be trained to understand how to respond to that. So if you say, why can't I access your paywall? It might not even know what a paywall is. It needs training in order to understand that. And a lot of times a bot, especially some of the cheaper priced ones, don't come with anything. Whereas a virtual assistant usually gets you a head start with a really robust corpus. Ours, for example, comes with 180,000 of the top questions, comes with 4,500 intents. So right off the bat, from day one, you already have a huge head start with our virtual assistant because it has this built-in corpus. So keep that in mind as well. And AI, a lot of bots say they come with AI, but as I said earlier, that term is very relative. And so, is there actual artificial intelligence built into that bot? That's the type of research that you're going to have to look into. Whereas a virtual assistant does tend to have AI. Notice how I did not put air quotes under virtual assistant. It almost always relies on AI. And the last point here is bots typically don't offer machine learning, whereas a virtual assistant does. So that's at a high level some of the differences between a bot and a virtual assistant. I want to double down a little more on the virtual assistant now and talk about a few other key pieces here. Context is something that's really important. This is one of the things that virtual assistants do very well. So here I am, and I'm asking, how do I change my card? Now let's say I am talking to a cellular provider, a telecom provider. That card could be a SIM card. I could be asking, how do I get a new SIM card? I can be asking, how do I replace my SIM card? I can be talking about a credit card, a gift card, a greeting card. I can be talking about anything. By using context and looking at past conversations or other clues or indicators in the conversation, AI is able to assess what it is specifically that you're asking for without having to ask for additional intents, like did you mean? And so it's usually able to intelligently address that so that I get a response similar to this. Hi, Tony. I can help you transfer your gift card. So based on some of the other stuff that I talked about, it has assessed that that's what I'm trying to do, and now I'm able to continue that conversation. And what do I want to do? I want to transfer my gift card, and I'm able to do that all throughout this window here. Personalization is another big one. With virtual assistants, you can typically tie into a plethora of back office systems, and that allows your system, your virtual assistant, to be able to provide better assistance and more information. So for example, without personalization, if I was to ask how much is my bill, I might get a response like this. To view your bill, stranger. So, first of all, the bot doesn't even know who I am. And then it's giving me a laundry list of what I have to do. I'm on your channel. Just answer my question. I don't want to have to launch a browser and have to go back and forth between the browser and this chat window to figure out the 17 steps required to figure out how much my bill is. Not a very good customer experience. On the personalization, so when you're attached to the back office, you're able to personalize that question more. So now the virtual assistant can go back to the back, to let's say the billing system in this case, and be able to pull the proper information and be able to present it here. This makes me much happier. It told me how much I owed. Ooh, that's a lot. And it tells me when it's due, which is very soon. And then take it to the next level. I can choose to pay within this window as well. If I don't have to open up a new window, don't make me. If I can use Apple Pay, if I can use my credit card, if I can use Android Pay, if I can do everything within this chat window through integrations, let me do that. I can even ask for a payment extension. That makes me happy. Another personalization is, and this is a fun one, is can't watch Game of Thrones. That's not even a question. It's more like a comment, and basically I want an answer to that. So without back-end integration, you might get something like this, my personal favorite. Here's an article listing 20 possible reasons. Have a nice day. I don't know how I'm supposed to have a nice day when I'm going to spend most of it trying to troubleshoot this myself. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to close out this window. I'm going to pick up the phone, and I'm going to call you instead, which it defeats the purpose of having a chat window here. So not a very good experience. With back office integration, the assistant is able to ping various systems and be able to figure out why I can't watch Game of Thrones. Maybe it's because I haven't subscribed. This is very common on if you're a publisher, for example, and you have a paywall or you have perhaps a certain amount of free articles. After that, you have to pay. Maybe you're not subscribed. So if they're in the chat window, you might even be able to upsell them right there. Would you like to purchase it now? I can type yes, collect some payment information, or open up a separate web card and be able to make that purchase right then and there. Maybe it's a hardware issue. So the system can ping out the hardware and say, you know what? Your problem is that your router needs to be reset, and here are your instructions on how to do that. That now saved me another phone call. Or the dreaded conversation that none of us like to have, maybe you just didn't pay your bill. So you can make your bill payment directly online. So this type of stuff makes me happy. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward with your social channels and by using virtual assistants. The more information, the more context, the more personalization, the more integration you have with your back office, the better the experience is going to be for the customer. That makes the customer happier, and that saves you on that phone call as well. We are we're on quarter 2 here, but I do want to go over some best practices. And these are common questions that I get a lot. Training is so important, and the best way to get training, to train your system, is to ask the end user. It's as simple as that. Ask them if the article that you presented them was helpful. If they say yes, that's great. But if they say no, take it one step further and ask them. Say, well, how could we improve it? Get verbatim feedback directly from your users. And provide them alternatives. Perhaps if you have online chat and it's available now, they can launch directly into that because you want to be able to satisfy that customer. Or provide your phone number. If they need to pick up the phone and call you, if at this point they're frustrated and they're not happy because you weren't able to answer their question through the article, you don't want them leaving upset. So ask for feedback. And that applies in chat windows as well. And you might see this a lot as you're communicating with chats, is at the very end, the virtual assistant will ask, have I answered your question? Yes, no, chat with rep. And this is great. Obviously, when I click chat with rep, I'm going to chat with a rep. I'm sorry, I'm going to, no, that was right. I'm going to chat with a rep. But here's the next piece around best practices. Don't fear NLP. We are a society that texts all the time, to the point where a lot of times our eyes don't even notice a button in the chat window. So at this point, don't turn off the NLP, because as a user, I might still type in, yeah, but I want to talk about my last invoice. And so I'm going to send that off. And now, of course, you want to transfer, so you want to make it clear that you're transferring to a live agent. Then you want to make sure that that live agent, like I showed you through the Facebook integration, has reviewed the history, and now they're coming on and saying, hi, I see you have a question about your last bill. How can I help you today? So good old Jacob wants to help me out here. That's so important, because if my answer didn't get questioned, if my question didn't get answered, I might already be frustrated. And if I now talk to a live agent in this chat window who's going to ask me for the same information that I just gave your virtual assistant, that's just going to frustrate me even more. So make sure that as you're scaling and as you're integrating into social channels, that you're looking at these type of processes, making sure that your live agents are reviewing the chat history like we just showed. So chatting with a live agent, providing that button is always a great idea. Through AI, though, there's what's called a sentiment analyzer, and that's pretty cool. And what it does is it uses artificial intelligence to learn, exactly as it's called, sentiment. And so it looks at sentiment, it looks at various things to figure out whether or not a customer is getting frustrated or getting upset, and can escalate as a result, whatever that escalation is. So whether you're using a sentiment analyzer or doing this yourself through journey management or building or flows, these are some best practices to keep in mind. Perhaps if a similar question is asked twice, if they're going to ask it a third time, chances are they're not getting what they need. So that might be a good opportunity to escalate at that point. If they start the fourth question within 2 minutes. So if they keep pounding questions and questions in a short amount of time, you might want to transfer them to a live agent at that point. Another one is if they trigger keywords, like the word agent, human, person, rep, but make sure that it's not in the answer. So it shouldn't be a catch-all. It shouldn't be that if they use the word human or if they use the word agent, automatically transfer to an agent, because maybe agent is part of the answer of the question that the virtual assistant asked them. So that goes back to context. Make sure that there's intelligence built into that. This is my personal favorite, is if the response is in all caps. So if they are answering the bot in all capital letters or the virtual assistant in all capital letters, they might be yelling at it, just like they do in a store. So you might want to escalate. But keep in mind, goes back to context. If the entire conversation is in all caps, maybe they have the cap locks key. Maybe they're not upset. Maybe they really are just using all caps. And, of course, our personal favorite, they're using foul language. At that point, the bots and the virtual agents, their feelings are not going to be hurt, but clearly your customer is upset, so you want to pass that along. And some additional best practices here, don't make it difficult to access a human. Okay? At the end of the day, remember, it's your customer, and you want to be able to talk to them, and they want to be able to talk to you if that's what they want. Don't make it difficult to figure out where your phone number is or how to escalate. And if you are using a virtual assistant, introduce that that's who they're speaking to. Don't try to fool them. Don't pretend it's a human. They'll figure it out, and that's just going to make them upset. They're used to talking to these kind of, to virtual assistants and IVR type systems when they pick up the phone. They are accustomed to this. So no need to lie or hide it. Make any escalations to an agent very clear. Okay, I'm going to now escalate your issue, and then provide that chat history and make sure that you have a policy in place to review it. This is a summary of what we just talked about, but in the last 5 minutes or so, I want to review training. And I talked about this earlier. Training is so important because this is what makes your AI and your virtual assistant smarter and better. And one of the ways to train, as I mentioned earlier, is to ask your customer for that type of feedback. Was this article helpful? Did this answer your question? Those type of things. And through that, every day you're going to get hundreds or thousands or millions, whatever, of yes, great feedback, and no, not so good feedback. Now, the good feedback is good to keep in mind as well, because even if you satisfy the customer's answer, you can still train the system, or the system can train itself, to see, okay, I was able to satisfy this customer through 4 steps, but maybe I'm able to do it in 3 or 2. So you still want to train even if the customer is happy, but you obviously want to prioritize the unhappy customers. So the type of training that the system does, and again, I'm giving you a high-level overview here, is let's say it starts off every day by looking at the negative feedback. And it's going to group it into two potential categories. The first is no answer at all. So the AI, or the VA was, sorry, AI, because it could be through search. The AI was unable to provide an answer, or they provided an answer, but the customer was not satisfied with that answer. So the system is going to double down on one of those, and it's going to sort it out. Now, these are sortations that you're going to want to put in place, depending on your priorities. You might want to, for example, sort by frequency. So if the same type of question was asked multiple times by multiple people, maybe that's where you put your priority. It's also a good way of understanding, looking at trends. Maybe there is a problem with your system or a problem with a product, and this will identify that type of trend. Maybe it's by cost. So it's a type of question that has cost you more for whatever reason, or by sales opportunity. The point is you figure out where your priorities are, and the system sorts it out, and then doubles down on some of that. What it starts doing is now analyzing and looking, okay, what's the problem here? And at the training aspect, what it's doing is the system now has to figure out what part failed. Why wasn't the customer satisfied? And there could be 4 potential buckets. The first is NLP. Maybe the language just wasn't understood. That's very possible. The second is intent. Maybe it hasn't heard that type of intent before. So the system was asked a question that it doesn't have an answer to because it never understood that intent. So it doesn't have any routines or understandings of how to address that customer issue. Next, it could be context. We talked about that earlier. Maybe there just wasn't enough data to drive the right answer. And sometimes it's just content. There's just no article that's able to address that issue, or there isn't a policy in place. A policy doesn't exist to be able to satisfy that customer. So the system starts, we'll pick one out, and then you start training. Now, this is where we talked about earlier about supervised and unsupervised training. So a lot of the training that happens at this point is, yes, the system is providing guidance, but the human is still providing that type of supervision. So that supervised learning, that's where this comes in. So you want to train it for whatever failed earlier. Then we talked about with a VA, you can have multi-channel. So you want to make sure that that question can now be answered across all your channels. Now, what I mean specifically about this is the way that, for example, you answer a question in Facebook might be different than how you answer it through SMS or through Twitter. There are certain limitations, like SMS, the limitation of 140 characters. So you have to be able to answer that question within 140 characters, whereas Facebook, it's a little more conversational. Search, it's going to be a longer article. So you want to make sure that when you're training so that it's coherent to the channel that it's on. And multi-language. Perhaps you provide support in more languages, so you want to make sure that that answer is available in different languages. And, of course, testing it to make sure that all that worked. At that point, once you're ready and the training is successful and everything else happens, it then goes live. And so where we're at is a question that was asked the day before, perhaps on Facebook, that wasn't able to be addressed and made an unhappy customer. Today, we're able to now properly address that question because the system has been trained, and we always want to aim for that big thumbs up. So that's what I had for you today. It was a lot of me talking, and we're almost at the end of the hour. I hope a lot of that was informative. I hope you guys, at the very least, level set. Again, I'd love your feedback. So there's some channels here, lots of different ways to get a hold of me and provide provide questions or any feedback that you might have, and also reach out to Matt. I think there might be time for some questions, so I'm going to turn it back to Matt now and see what's next.
Tony, thanks very much. Folks, we do have a few minutes for questions, and there's 2 ways that you can ask your questions. One, you can submit your questions via the Q&A tab in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Just type your message in at the bottom. You can either broadcast to all, you can broadcast to me, the co-presenters. Secondly, I'm going to unmute our lines now, and you can certainly ask your question over the phone. However, if we have any kind of audio interference or if we hear any hold music, I'm going to mute all the lines again, and then we're going to go ahead and unmute Tony to take your questions digitally. So I'm going to unmute all.
The conference has been unmuted.
There you guys have the power. Tony, while I'm waiting for people to get their questions ready, I do have one. Can you talk about where we can start with cognitive care? I mean, what channels, how many, over what time frame should you be considering?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we typically recommend starting with one or two channels. And of course, you're going to want to do your research. You're going to want to see where your customers are mostly. We find most people start with, let's say, web chat. So that's chat that's directly on their website, maybe Facebook. And that's going to give the system a chance to learn and understand your uniqueness, your brand. And then over time, you can start adding additional channels. I wouldn't say go AI on all your channels. Again, you want to probably do two or three start off with two or three, and then slowly start adding one, and you know, over time, adding additional ones.
All right, terrific. Folks, any questions? Either you want to type in at the bottom or ask Tony directly. Tony, you talked a little bit about Corpus, and for virtual assistants, can you talk a little bit about how a unique brand and uses cases are dealt with if there already is a Corpus?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. So what we talked about earlier is sometimes a bot that, you know, comes with zero learning, and a virtual assistant comes with some learning. I can tell you from experience what we do is we ingest a lot of your history, a lot of your articles and your knowledge base up front so that the system can then match up anything that's already existing and update it based on, you know, any type of unique brands that you might have or unique use cases. And again, over time, the system will learn that as well. The other thing that's important to keep in mind, and I should have mentioned this earlier as well, is your tone. Not just tone by channel. You know, sometimes on Facebook you want to be a little, or in a chat window you want to be a little more conversational. Perhaps in certain channels you want to be a little more formal or to the point, especially if there's a character limit. But also the tone of your brand. So you want to make sure that that over time, whatever content you're creating, whatever answers you're providing is to the tone of your brand as well. So a corpus is a starting point, but it doesn't replace what's already there. It should enhance and over time grow, you know, what's already built in-house.
Okay, terrific. Folks, we've just got a couple minutes left if you want to type in a question or ask Tony directly.
Yeah, I will say again that, you know, I know that AI can be daunting and it can be you know, a little scary, and asking a question can also be scary on a webinar. But you know, if you guys do have stuff that you want to follow up with me afterwards, feel free to use the social channels. I love talking about this stuff, so you know, happy to help out. You know, happy to help out even after the webinar. So feel free to reach out.
All right, great. Tony, you had really emphasized supervised learning throughout the webinar. Can you give an example of the downfall of unsupervised learning?
Yeah, you know, I know they don't like us to keep talking about this. I'm sure it's one of those things where they wish that everyone would forget, but I think it's the poster child of examples around unsupervised learning. And although I forgot the name of it, Microsoft a while back provided, I believe it was through Twitter, a virtual assistant, and you can to show what unsupervised training would do. And you know, at the beginning of the day, or it may have been semi-unsupervised, I don't recall, but I know that it was not all supervised. And at the beginning of the day, she was cheery and very helpful and very nice, but by the end of the day, she was taught to be prejudiced and foul language, and you know, it was just not the best experience. They had to take it offline. So, you know, again, unsupervised learning is the dream, you know, but the reality is we still need a lot of that interaction, and you know, that's also opened up whole new industries in terms of job creation and in training these type of AIs as well around that supervision. So again, it's not a matter of the humans, like people doing, I hate to keep calling them the humans. It's not a matter of people continuing to do it, but you're always going to need some of that guidance and audits as well. So throughout your training, you want to have those checkpoints in place where even if we get to the point where there's unsupervised training, there's still an audit back there as well and a way to course correct if something goes wrong.
All right, terrific. Folks, we are about out of time. Tony, thanks very much for the terrific overview on practical application of AI. Folks, if you do have questions and you want to follow up directly with Tony, you can see his slide here with his contact information. I'm going to leave that on screen for a couple minutes even after we officially close the webinar. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be sending an archive shortly. Tony, thanks again.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.